Imagine spending your entire life giving everything to your only child, money, love, a home, only to discover you were nothing more than their personal bank account. That's what happened to me, and when they tried to take the one thing I had left, I finally broke the machine they had been feeding on for years. Before I begin, ask yourself, what would you do if your child and their spouse cut you out of their wedding, then demanded the keys to your multi-million-dollar home? Would you surrender, or would you fight back? Stay with me until the end of this story, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you believe no parent should ever be treated as a wallet. I was 71 when my world cracked open. My son Daniel stood in my kitchen, avoiding my eyes, while his new wife Lydia smirked, her words sliced sharper than any knife. We got married last night. VIPs only. For a second, I thought I misheard, but the curl of her lips told me she wanted me to feel the sting. VIPs only, and I, Daniel's mother, wasn't one of them. I had covered their rent for 3 years. $1,800 a month, 36 months in a row. That was $64,800. I bought groceries, birthday gifts, even paid for Daniel's car repair when the engine died. I had shelled out over $77,000 in total, and I had bought Lydia's wedding dress, a lavender gown with sequins, $1,200 on my credit card. Yet on the most important day of his life, my son let me find out after the fact. Lydia looked me dead in the eye. It was family only, the real family. Daniel kept his hands in his pockets, his gaze glued to the floor. My heart didn't just crack, it collapsed. In that moment, I understood what I had been all these years, not a mother, not even a person, but a bottomless vending machine. 3 days later, the phone rang. Lydia's voice was sharp, casual. "Did you send the keys to the villa yet? Daniel and I are ready to move in." The villa. My villa. The $5 million oceanfront home my late husband and I built together. It wasn't just property, it was the only sanctuary I had left. The garden Harold and I planted roses in, the dining room where I still set 2 plates even though one had been empty for years. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. "Excuse me?" "The keys," she repeated, impatient. "It's time you let us start our life there." The arrogance was almost comical. They had excluded me from their wedding, humiliated me, and now thought they could take over the roof above my head. My lips curled into a bitter smile as I whispered, "Didn't I mention the condition?" Then I hung up. For years I had written checks, answered every call for money, nodded whenever Daniel begged, "Just this once, Mom." But something inside me shifted. I was done. That night I locked every door, double-checked every bolt. I stood on the balcony, watching the moonlight ripple across the waves, and thought of Lydia's smirk, Daniel's silence, and my own words. Didn't I mention the condition? For the first time in years, I felt control. I felt fire. The next morning, I sat at my dining table with a yellow legal pad and wrote down every dollar I had poured into Daniel's life since college. $64,800 in rent, $7,200 in groceries, $3,500 in gifts, $2,000 for the car. The total, $77,000, stared back at me like a cruel joke. My motherhood reduced to receipts. My love turned into debt. Across the room hung the lavender gown Lydia had left behind after a fitting, still shimmering with sequins. On the floor, the silver heels I had bought her sat untouched in their tissue paper. I had pictured her walking down the aisle in them. Instead, she had walked into her new life without me. I whispered into the empty room. I was nothing but a bottomless vending machine. The phrase clung to me like a brand. I could almost hear Harold's voice reminding me, "Love without respect is just charity." A week before their so-called VIP wedding, Daniel had asked me for another $5,000, my gift. I said yes, even though I knew it would vanish into a vacation I wasn't invited to. $5,000 more, stacked on the $77,000. I had been humiliated, erased, and now they wanted the villa too. I dialed Daniel. He answered on the third ring. "Mom," he said cautiously. "That villa is mine," I told him. "It stays mine." You and Lydia will not move in without my permission." He tried the same line as always. "Isn't that what family does? Helps each other?" "Family doesn't cut their mother out of a wedding and then demand the keys to her house," I shot back. Silence. Then he sighed. "You're making this harder than it has to be." "Harder?" I almost laughed. "I already made it easy for you." $77,500. Easy. "The machine is broken now." He hung up. The click echoed in my ear. I underlined the number on my legal pad and whispered, "No more." 3 days later, I heard the crunch of tires on my driveway. Daniel's car. Lydia in the passenger seat, sunglasses perched high, lips already pursed in disapproval. They didn't knock. They walked up the steps like they owned the place. I opened the door before they could ring the bell. "What are you doing here?" I asked flatly. "Getting a head start," Daniel said weakly. "Moving some things?" Lydia brushed past him, gazing around the foyer. "Spacious. Perfect for entertaining. This is my home." Her smirk curled like smoke. "Not for long." "Keys, please." I straightened my spine. "Only VIPs get help." "Remember that?" Daniel stepped forward, palms raised. "Mom, let's not." "She meant every word," I snapped. "And now you both mean to walk into my villa like it's yours. Not today." Lydia folded her arms. "This house is Daniel's inheritance anyway. Why delay the inevitable?" "Inheritance comes after death," I replied coldly. "Last time I checked, I'm still alive." The silence thickened. Finally, I laid it out. "If you want to step inside this villa, you'll pay 6 months of rent from your own pockets, and you'll sign a no-claim agreement stating you have no legal rights to this property or my estate. Do that, and only then will I hand over a key." Lydia's face flushed with rage. Daniel's hands curled into fists. "That's ridiculous," she spat. "You can't put conditions on your own family. I just did." "You'll regret this," she hissed. "When you're old and alone, you'll wish you had been kinder." "I'd rather be alone than used," I told her, steady as stone. They stormed out, heels clicking, engine roaring. I leaned against the door, breath shaky but proud. For the first time in decades, I hadn't reached for my checkbook. I had drawn a line. But deep down, I knew Lydia wouldn't accept defeat quietly. The morning after that confrontation, I dressed carefully, navy cardigan, pressed slacks, the kind Harold always said made me look put together. I needed strength, and sometimes strength begins with the way you button your collar. At the bank, I sat across from Mr. Place. Walters, the branch manager who had known Harold and me for decades. "I want to stop every automatic transfer to my son Daniel and his wife," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. His brows lifted, but he didn't interrupt. He simply nodded. I explained everything. The rent payments, the groceries, the car repairs, the endless stream of money I had funneled into their lives. $77,500, I whispered. And yesterday they came into my home as if I were already dead. Mr. Walters's eyes darkened. "Mrs. Harris, that sounds like financial abuse." "Elder abuse, plain and simple." "I know," I admitted. "That's why I'm here." The machine is broken. Together we canceled every transfer. Each signature on those forms straightened my spine a little more. By the time I walked out, the Florida sun felt like it was burning a new path for me. But peace didn't last. That evening, headlights swept across my driveway. Daniel stood at my door with a man in a crisp suit. Lydia lurked behind them, her arms folded, her smile razor sharp. "Mom," Daniel began softly, "this is Mr. Smister. Carlton. He's here to make sure your finances are in order." Carlton extended a manicured hand. "Mrs. Harris, I represent your son and daughter-in-law. If you'll let us in, we can review your documents and ensure everything is managed properly." I didn't take his hand. "My documents are private." He smiled thinly. "Sometimes families don't recognize when it's time to step aside. This villa, your accounts, they're complicated. We just want to protect you." My blood boiled. Protect me from what? From the home my husband built? From buying my own groceries? No, thank you. Daniel's jaw tightened. Mom, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I stepped forward. I already did. I went to the bank today. The money flow is over. The bottomless vending machine is shut down. For the first time, Daniel's mask cracked. Lydia's eyes narrowed to slits. Carlton cleared his throat, clearly irritated. We'll be in touch, Mrs. Harris. They left in silence, but I could feel the storm brewing. That night, I changed every lock on my villa and scheduled security cameras to be installed by the week's end. As I screwed in the last bolt, I whispered, I may be 71, but I am not powerless. Still, I knew I couldn't fight them alone. That's when Eleanor appeared. I met her at the Community Garden Club, a place I hadn't visited in years. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, she saw the heaviness in me before I even spoke. Over tea, the words spilled out. Daniel, Lydia, the villa, the endless drain of money. She listened and then said simply, close the bank. My daughter once tried the same thing. When I cut her off, she called me cruel. But 6 months later, she learned to stand. It saved us both. Her words landed like sunlight. For the first time, I realized I wasn't alone. Other mothers had faced this. Other women had survived. Through Eleanor, I found an ally, attorney Marcus Weber. Calm, sharp, with streaks of gray at his temples, he looked over my receipts, my legal pad, my trembling hands. What you're describing is elder financial abuse, he said firmly, and I'll help you fight back. He laid out the plan. Document everything. Secure the villa. Prepare for escalation. They've already brought a lawyer, he warned. That means they'll likely try to paint you as incompetent. Guardianship petitions, power of attorney tricks, it's an old playbook. But we'll counter it. You're not alone anymore. His words felt like armor. For weeks, I had been on defense. Now, for the first time, I had an offense. The storm broke sooner than expected. A thick envelope arrived at my doorstep. Inside was a letter signed by Carlton. Daniel and Lydia were petitioning the court for guardianship. They claimed I was no longer capable of managing my affairs. If they succeeded, I would lose control of my bank accounts, my property, even my villa. I would be reduced to a child in the eyes of the law. The audacity nearly knocked the breath out of me. Soon after, a knock echoed at my door. A woman in a gray suit introduced herself as Ms. Schultz, a social worker assigned to investigate. Clipboard in hand, she scanned my home with critical eyes. The bills neatly stacked on my dining table, the groceries in my fridge, even the lavender gown Lydia had left behind. I'm here to ensure you're safe and able to manage on your own, she said. I poured her tea with steady hands. The only danger in this house is how much money I've been giving away. She didn't smile. She only scribbled notes and promised to follow up. 2 days later, she returned. But this time, she wasn't alone. Daniel and Lydia trailed behind her, with Carlton in tow. Lydia's smirk returned as she glanced around the villa. It's too much for her to handle, she said sweetly. She forgets things. Misplaces important papers. We just want to help. Before I could reply, Weber walked in through the front door, briefcase in hand. Good morning, he said, his voice calm but commanding. I'm Marcus Weber, counsel for Mrs. Ease. Harris, I'd like to provide documentation. The room shifted instantly. Lydia's smirk faltered. Daniel looked at his shoes. Even Carlton's polished smile cracked. Weber laid out copies of my bank records. Over 3 years, Mrs. Harris paid $77,500 in rent, groceries, gifts, and car repairs for her son and daughter-in-law. Not confusion, generosity. Generosity that was abused. If she were incompetent, would she have canceled automatic transfers? Changed locks? Installed security cameras? No, this is not incapacity, it's courage. Ms. Schultz studied the documents, her lips tightening. Lydia tried again, dragging in neighbors and even the local pharmacist to whisper about my confusion. Weber cut them down one by one. Gossip, not evidence. Caution, not incompetence. Finally, he turned to Carlton. What your clients want is not protection. It's control of a 5 million villa. That's exploitation, not guardianship. The room went still. Miss Schultz closed her folder. From what I've seen, Mrs. Harris is more than capable of managing her own affairs. Relief rushed through me so hard I nearly collapsed. For the first time, the tide had turned, but Lydia's eyes burned with fury as she left my home. I knew she wasn't finished. This was just round one. That night, I sat at my dining table, Harold's photo beside me, and whispered, "The machine is broken, and I'm ready for war." The day of the hearing arrived with skies as gray as my mood. I wore Harold's old favorite navy dress suit, simple but dignified. My cane tapped against the courthouse steps as I climbed, my knees aching but my spine straight. This wasn't just another day. This was the day my own son tried to strip me of my life. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with whispers. Neighbors, acquaintances, even members of the garden club filled the gallery. I took my seat at the defense table beside Weber, my heart pounding in my ears. Across from us, Daniel sat with Lydia and Carlton. Lydia's lips curled into her signature smirk. Daniel couldn't meet my eyes. The judge entered stern, commanding, "This court is now in session. Petitioners, proceed." Carlton rose, voice smooth as silk. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter. Mrs. Harris, at 71, is no longer capable of managing her finances or property. My clients, her devoted son and daughter-in-law, only wish to protect her from decline and ensure her estate is handled responsibly." "Devoted," I muttered under my breath. He called his first witness, Mr. Pry. "Davis, my bitter neighbor. I've seen Mrs. Harris argue in her driveway," Davis said, shifting nervously. "She seems paranoid, let strangers come and go." "She's not the same. The strangers were my garden club friends dropping off casseroles." Next came the pharmacist, repeating the old claim that I was confused about my prescriptions. Carlton read it like gospel, conveniently ignoring the truth. Finally, their crown jewel, Dr. Crew. Layman, a psychiatrist who had never spoken to me. He sat tall, spectacles glinting. "Based on reports, Mrs. Harris shows diminished capacity. Poor judgment, impaired memory. Guardianship would provide stability." Then came the cruelest blow. Daniel took the stand. My son, the boy I had once rocked to sleep. "My mother forgets things," he said, voice low. "She loses track of money. She doesn't know what's best anymore. We just want to help her." The words pierced deeper than any lawyer's argument. To hear my own son say I wasn't capable, it felt like being buried alive. Lydia dabbed her eyes with a tissue, the picture of concern. When Carlton finally rested his case, I thought my knees would give way. But Weber leaned close and whispered, "Hold steady. Their story is crumbling. Now we show the truth." He rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor," he began, "what you've heard is not evidence of incapacity. It is evidence of exploitation." He started with Davis. "These arguments you saw in the driveway, were they about confusion or money?" "Money," Davis admitted reluctantly. "So, not confusion, but a mother finally saying no after years of paying?" Davis flushed. "Yes, I suppose. And the strangers you claim, they were licensed security installers. Garden club members, friends. You mistook kindness for chaos, didn't you?" Davis wilted in his chair. Next came the pharmacist. Weber forced him to admit he had retracted his earlier statement, pressured by Lydia into twisting my words. "She wasn't confused," he said finally, his voice trembling. "She was cautious, responsible," the gallery murmured. Lydia's face hardened. Then Weber turned on Dr. Layman. "Doctor, have you ever personally examined Mrs. Izzy Harris?" "No, but... So your testimony is hearsay, not a single test. Not a single word exchanged with her. Correct?" "Yes, but no further questions." The polished veneer cracked. Finally, Weber laid our trump cards on the table. "Your Honor, here is Dr. Cray." Moore's full evaluation. Unlike Dr. Cried. Layman, Dr. Moore examined Mrs. Bixby Harris personally. He found her above average in reasoning, memory, and judgment. The judge flipped through the report, his brow lifting. But Weber wasn't done. He held up another document, the no-claim agreement I had drafted weeks earlier. This agreement proves foresight. Mrs. Sursight. Mrs. Harris set boundaries, requiring her son and daughter-in-law to pay their own rent and waive any claim to her estate if they wanted access to her villa. That is not confusion. That is clarity. Then he looked at me. Mrs. Person. Harris, would you like to speak for yourself? My legs trembled, but I rose. I faced the judge, the gallery, and finally my son. For years, I thought love meant giving, I began. 36 months of rent, $64,800. Groceries, gifts, car repairs, in total, $77,500. I gave and gave, hoping my son would see me. But I wasn't his mother. I was his bottomless vending machine. The words rang through the courtroom. Lydia flinched. When they cut me out of their wedding, I stayed silent. But when they demanded the keys to my $5 million villa, I finally said no. And because I said no, they dragged me here to call me incompetent. But look at me. I am not broken. I am not weak. I am free. The silence that followed was thick. Even Daniel lowered his eyes. Judge Alvarez leaned forward. His tone was steady, decisive. The petitioner's evidence is insufficient and, in some cases, outright retracted. The defense has provided credible documentation, professional evaluation, and testimony proving Mrs. Harris is fully capable of managing her affairs. The petition for guardianship is denied. The gavel struck. The sound echoed like thunder. I had won. Across the aisle, Lydia's face twisted with fury. Daniel's shoulders slumped, shame dragging him down. But I didn't look at them for long. I turned instead to Eleanor and the Garden Club women in the gallery. To Weber, to Dr. Moore. To every face that had stood with me. The machine is broken, I whispered. And I am free. The next week I sold the villa, $5 million, gone to someone else's name. The keys Lydia and Daniel wanted so badly meant nothing to me now. I moved into a smaller condo overlooking the sea, peaceful, mine, untouchable. $1 million went straight to a foundation fighting elder financial abuse. I wanted every woman who had ever been treated as a bank account to know they weren't alone. The rest I kept for living, not surviving, not defending, but living. Eleanor and I traveled. Florence, Rome, Venice. We laughed until our cheeks hurt, sipped wine in gardens, and reminded ourselves life wasn't over just because someone tried to bury us early. And one quiet evening, back at my condo, I sat on the balcony with Harold's photograph in my lap. The sunset painted gold across the water. We did it, I whispered. They wanted to erase me, but I stood. I'm not their vending machine anymore. I'm free. I looked straight into the lens of life itself. The same lens that brought me here to share this story with you. And I'll ask you what I asked at the start. What would you have done? Would you have handed them the keys? Or would you have fought back like I did? If my story made you feel even a spark of fire, don't let it end here. Like, share, and subscribe so more people know they are not alone. Together, we can break the machines and remind the world that no parent, no elder, no soul deserves to be treated like a bank account.